the Biden administration after it announced it was setting up a disinformation governance board. Sounds like something from 1984, right? Well, it's supposed to combat misinformation ahead of the midterms. Person heading it, a woman named Nina Jankowicz. She is a Russian disinformation expert who cast doubt on the New York Post reporting about Hunter Biden's laptop. She suggested it was, quote, a Trump campaign product in 2020. Of course, the news comes just days after Twitter was sold to Elon Musk. Some critics are calling the timing Orwellian, you think? Jankowicz herself says she shudders to think about Musk taking over Twitter. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas explaining why the board was created during testimony yesterday.
We have just established a Mis- and Disinformation Governance Board in the Department of Homeland Security to more effectively combat this threat, not only to election security, but to our homeland security.
Joe Biden cannot continue to control this country if you have free access to information. It's that simple. Biden certainly is not improving your life. He's not even trying to improve your life. So the best he can do is lie to you and demand that you believe it. But to do that, he needs to make certain that nobody else can talk, because if you were to hear the truth, you might not obey. How is Biden going to pull that off? It's not easy. Well, one option would be to get men with guns to tell you to shut up.
We have so many different efforts underway to equip local communities to identify individuals who very well could be descending into violence by reason of ideologies of hate, false narratives, or other disinformation and misinformation propagated on social media and other platforms.
Oh, did you know that? So one of our biggest law enforcement agencies has men with guns around the country doing so many things to stop disinformation and false narratives. Those aren't even lies. They're just deviations from the approved script. Mayorkas told us again that men with guns plan to, quote, identify individuals who could be descending into violence, could be descending. Not people who've committed violence or even been accused of any crime at all. DHS is instead using law enforcement powers to identify and punish people who think the wrong things. That would be opponents of the Biden administration. Is this dystopian fiction? No, it's happening right in front of us. That means that Joe Biden's partisan political enemies are now officially enemies of the state.
For approval of H.R. 8791, the Homeland Terrorism Preparedness Bill. Said bill requests emergency response funding up to and including, this section is classified, dollars to prepare for a national level terrorist attack and or attack from classified. Funding for first responder personnel and vehicles would be doubled if said attack leads to more than 80% of national population being affected by classified. This funding shall commence in conjunction with the first attack on classified or the first large-scale outbreak of classified, dependent upon which comes first. Civilian and military units shall be trained in containment and combat of classified, including irradiated classified with possibility of classified airborne, classified flesh-eating, classified, and or all of the above in such event as classified spewing, classified escape, are released or otherwise become uncontrollable. Air Force units may also be directed to combat said classified due to their enormous size and otherworldly strengths. Should event occur in urban areas, that's classified, far surpassing our darkest nightmares. Should casualties exceed classified, body disposal actions shall be halted and associated resources shall be reallocated to classified underground, classified protected birthing centers. A new Bill of Rights shall be drafted and approved by classified. Having now reviewed the bill, I ask you to please cast your votes.
Every day, the Department of Homeland Security's more than 240,000 dedicated public servants work tirelessly to keep our communities safe and secure. Today, I will highlight the work our department is undertaking to combat the most significant and immediate terrorism-related threat to our homeland, which is the threat posed by domestic violent extremism. The terrorism-related threats we face as a nation have significantly evolved since the department's creation in the wake of the September 11th terrorist attacks. The threat landscape is now more complex, more dynamic, and more diversified. Today, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists are the most likely to conduct mass casualty attacks against civilians, and anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists, specifically militia violent extremists, are the most likely to target law enforcement, government personnel, and government facilities. The threats posed by domestic violent extremism are often fueled by false narratives, conspiracy theories, and extremist rhetoric spread throughout social media and other online platforms. Further, domestic violent extremists who act alone continue to pose significant detection and disruption challenges because of their capacity for independent radicalization to violence, their ability to mobilize discreetly, and their access to weapons. As a result, the department is redoubling its efforts to detect and disrupt all forms of foreign and domestic terrorism and targeted violence, while safeguarding privacy protections, civil rights, and civil liberties. The department is taking a new approach to addressing domestic violent extremism, both internally and externally. In January, DHS released a National Terrorism Advisory System, or NTAS, bulletin highlighting the threat posed by domestic violent extremists. It was the first NTAS issued in over a year and also the first solely focused on a domestic threat. In addition, this year I designated for the first time domestic violent extremism as a national priority area within the department's Homeland Security grant program. This means that state and urban areas across the nation will spend at least $77 million to prevent, prepare for, protect against, and respond to acts of domestic violent extremism. The department is currently expanding its analytic focus to more comprehensively review how extremists exploit and leverage social media and other online platforms, and how online activities are linked to real-world violence. We are also enhancing our ability to analyze, produce, and disseminate products that address the full range of terrorism and targeted violence. We recently established a dedicated domestic terrorism branch within our Office of Intelligence and Analysis to ensure the department develops the expertise necessary to combat this threat using sound, timely intelligence. One of the department's most important missions is to provide actionable intelligence to the broadest audience at the lowest classification level possible. As a result, DHS is working closely with its partners to augment its intelligence and information capabilities to inform public safety and security planning efforts across the country. In the coming months, the department will increase training options and other support to help identify individuals at risk of radicalization. Among my top priorities is to ensure that our personnel can perform their critical missions, that they feel safe and secure at work, and that the fabric of our department is not penetrated by hate or violent extremism. In light of this commitment, I announced last month an internal review to address potential threats related to domestic violent extremism within DHS and ensure we are not compromised in our ability to protect our country. As I have said before, the Department of Homeland Security is fundamentally a department of partnerships. Our success depends on the strength of these partnerships, as we cannot accomplish our mission alone. DHS will remain focused on strengthening its partnerships across every level of government, the private sector, and the diverse communities we serve to enhance together our collective prevention capabilities nationwide. We recently established a new Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, or CP3, to improve the department's ability to combat terrorism and targeted violence by leveraging behavioral threat assessment and management tools capable of identifying early risk factors that can lead to violence in communities across the country. Individuals who may be radicalizing or have radicalized to violence typically exhibit behaviors that are recognizable to many, but are best understood by those closest to them, such as friends, family, and classmates.
It certainly is one of the Russians' goals to interfere with American politics to the greatest extent possible.
There's no question that the Russian government and the Russian intelligence services have sought to try to sow divisiveness and discord in our country and in other countries. It's not unique to targeting the United States, but to try to interfere with the populace and to undermine our own faith in our institutions and in each other as Americans. And that is clearly part of their playbook. They use a variety of tools to do that, social media, proxies that they enlist. It is information warfare, which is itself not a new phenomenon, but what is new over the course of the last decade or so is some of the tools that advance it. In particular, the use of social media becomes sort of a bullhorn to amplify those kinds of operations. And as we look forward, we have to worry more about things like deep fakes as they become more and more sophisticated and harder to detect. And so information warfare is here to stay. What we need to make sure we're doing at the FBI, but also with all of our partners, because it's not a uniquely FBI responsibility, is to try to make sure we're ahead of that threat. And I think Americans can have, and I'm confident that Americans can have faith in our election system and our election infrastructure. There's no question that one of the real risks we have to guard against is having Americans lose faith in our system as a whole and in democracy. And that's something that we need to guard against, and that is harder to guard against, certainly as any one government agency. That's something that requires not just government agencies on the federal side, state and local governments, the private sector, and in some ways it requires every American to play a part in that, to be a discerning, thoughtful consumer of information.